Respected chairperson of the seminar, Professor D.N. Tiwari, formerly professor of the Department of Philosophy and Religion, Banaras Hindu University. Respected speaker of the seminar, Professor Anke Sandar. Respected Professor Anand Mishra, head of the Department of Philosophy and Religion, Banaras Hindu University. All the respected professors of our department, dear colleagues, dear scholars, and dear student friends. I am Rajiva Lochon Behera, Assistant Professor of the Department of Philosophy and Religion, Banaras Hindu University. I am indeed and delighted to be here to do this good job, but I am very sad that the real organizer of this seminar, Dr. Niti Singh, Assistant Professor of the Department of Philosophy and Religion, Banaras Hindu University, is suffering from severe health problem, and her grandmother passed away yesterday. So I pray to God and goddesses for grandmother's departed soul rest in peace. Now, I would like to request to our HOD, respected Professor Anand Mishra, to deliver the welcome address of the seminar today.
Hari Om. Honorable Chairperson Professor D.N. Tiwari ji, learned speaker Professor X. Sander, Professor Kumar Mehta ji, Professor Gangadhar ji, our colleagues, students, scholars, present offline or online, I welcome you all in this Saturday seminar. Friends, our speaker today is Professor X. Sander. He is from Sweden and he is a renowned scholar of religious studies. We are lucky that today he would deliver his lecture on this very problem of religious studies, in India. That would be the theme of his lecture. Recently, he has published the book, as I told you, the book has been published from Routledge. A South Asian edition of that book has also brought out, and that is very interesting. I think most of you have already been circulated online some of the excerpts of that book. So I am very sure that you would enjoy his lecture. Professor Sander is not unfamiliar to the department. In fact, 10 years an MOU with the different universities of Sweden, and he was the man behind that. He initiated the Go India project, and then some of our faculties visited Sweden. Then many faculties from Sweden and students also, they visited from Sweden to India, and then we also organized international seminar here as well as in Sweden. jointly. So I am very happy to welcome Professor Sender as well as Mrs. Sender. And I also welcome Professor D.N. Tiwari ji, who is a good friend of Professor Sender. He would preside the lecture today. And I also welcome Professor D.A. Gangadhar ji and our other colleagues who are present online, and the scholars and students who are present offline in the lecture series. Thank you. I welcome again all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, I would like to invite our distinguished speaker, Professor Anke Sandar. I'd like to introduce him in a very brief words. As we know, he is a distinguished professor and researcher. He has been attempting to know and understand the phenomena of religion and religiosity and their influence on people's way of experiencing, thinking, feeling, and acting during the 1970s and 1980s. He spent several years in South Asia, primarily India, studying the philosophy and practice of yoga and Theravada meditation. After his PhD, his primary focus was for 25 years the encounter between Islam, Muslims, and Europe, Sweden. During the last 20 years, Professor Sanders' interests have returned back towards India and the Indic religious and cultural traditions. In this connection, he has entered into cooperation, agreements, and joint projects with Banaras Hindu University in Varanasi, Jadavpur University in Kolkata, Vishwabharat University, Santiniketan, Pondicherry University, Pondicherry, and Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. He has also, since the early 2000s, developed field study courses and organized field studies trips to India for LIR and other students, 2009 to 2012. He was the leader of the Go India platform, which is one of the 4 interdisciplinary projects. The University of Gothenburg has granted funding 2011 to 2013 as part of its global university venture. In addition to his interest in empirically oriented research, Professor Sander has, throughout his career, displayed a keen interest in the theoretically oriented study of such matters as the working and potentialities of the human mind, especially in relation to so-called alternative states of mind. the phenomenology of religion, which focuses on such phenomena as religious experience, religious consciousness, mysticism, theory of meditation. The nature of religious change in a late modern globalized world and the cultural homiletical challenges that arise when attempting to understand and communicate with persons whose culture, religion, and interpretive patterns differs from one's own. Professor Sander have published over 100 articles and 10 books. Sir, we are very much glad to have you among us today for a presentation on the topic religious studies in India. Sir, I would like to invite to the stage.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction, professors and scholars and other listeners on or outside of the net. I'm very happy to be here today. Wasn't sure we could get here at all this time, but we had planned to stay here in Varanasi for a longer time, but due to COVID, we got stuck in Kathmandu for a month before we could leave there. But anyhow, we got here for a short time, so I'm glad to be here. And I was asked by Dr. Nidhi Singh if I would come here to talk about our latest book, The Future of Religious Studies in India. There is one copy we can send around if you want. And I said I can do that. So it's not really a standard, typical lecture I want to give. I want to talk about the book, the content of the book, and so on. The book has a long history. We started doing some research in India in connection with the Go India project that was mentioned. And then we had a project called Religion on Campus, which I'm going to talk about a little more later, which involved interviews with staff, faculty, and PhD students on a number of universities in India about their view on religion both in the institution as study and as research, and religion on campus and religion in itself. So, why study religion? That's probably the main first question. And I would say that what we present in the book here is a number of reasons. And particularly, why study religion in India? What makes us wanted to do that? Why did we get interested in that in the first place? And one of the main reasons why we really got interested in that is that for many years, when we come into India, or when any Westerner coming to India, they notice that there is religion everywhere. That's the impression that a Western person who comes from very secularized countries, when they come to India, you see the statues, the pictures, and everything. Every car has a Ganesha on the windshield, and there is religion all over. When you start looking at the universities, you look around there, can you find any departments of religious studies? Almost none. There is a few, a handful who has the religion in name, and BHU is one, Vishwabharati is another, and there are a few more. Whether if you look in Europe, on the other hand, or in the United States, every university almost has a department that studies religion. So you have this contradiction in the sense. In India, there is religion everywhere except in the universities. And in the United States and Europe, there is religion nowhere except on the universities. So how come? This sort of contradiction here was what we wanted to look into. And since 20, 25 years back, if you follow the study of religion in the universities, you notice one big phenomenon, and that is that from about 1880s, 1860s, there's been a dominant trend in at least social science of religion, sociology, psychology, and so on, the political science, that religion is going to die out. That there is secularization in the world has been the dominant theme from Marx, Freud, Durkheim, Weber, and so on. Religion is going to die out. And everybody seemed to believe that until 1979, roughly, with the revolution in Iran. And then there was one happening after the other, with the sort of peak 2001, where with the terror attack in New York. And then we had the development in the Muslim countries. One first believed in the Arab Spring, but then we came back with sort of so-called fundamentalist Islam powers all over. It was politically important, it gets important for people, and we had all these terrorist problems. So it was clear to very many people in political science, sociology, and so on, that the secularization thesis was mistaken. Something else was going on. So the return of religion, or the desecularization of the world, there was lots of books coming out during the 90s with that theme. We have a list in that book of at least 20 of them that came out with that theme. And to explain that. And another trend is the more political, and we can see that's been increasing, and that's the sort of demise of what they call liberal democracies. In a lot of countries in Europe, in a lot of places in the world, there's been sort of right-wing, nationalistic, political movements on the rise. And a lot of times with the help of religious identity movements. Factors behind that political scientists take up are the so-called modernization and globalization phenomena. And globalization comes in two different versions, to make it very simple. One is hard globalization, economy, banking, industry, and so on. And one is soft globalization, or westernization, or Americanization, if you want, which are the ideological things, which is with the hard globalization, there is a push of Western ideology, Western lifestyles, and so on. And you might say that when you bring hard things into, take India, you bring in Apple computers, you bring in Levi's jeans, you bring in whatever hard part, there is a lifestyle associated with it, and it's a Western lifestyle associated with it. And that's sort of the soft globalization. And in a lot of the countries, particularly in the Muslim sphere, but also in other countries, there has been a reaction against that, against the soft type of globalization, against Western values and norms. So one concept has been modernization without westernization, without westernization. And religion has played a role in that sort of backlash there too. So in all those changes we've been seeing for the last 30 years, religion, I haven't defined that yet, but religion in the wide sense has played a role in that. And those changes has been made in religion more important, both on the macro level, on the meso level, and on the micro level for people. So that's why it seems important to study. And it seems like Peter Berger, who you probably heard of, he said already in the late 90s that religion seems to be almost part of human nature, that we would need a mutation of the species to really get secularization. He didn't believe in that, and many people after the other has agreed with that. So the effect of religion can be disputed. And as you said before, for Marx, Freud, and particularly, religion was something negative. For religious people, it's all the time something positive. But our belief is that it can be either or. And I can quote for you, you have in the book here, from already Vivekananda, who said, "We find that through there is nothing that has been brought to man more blessings than religion. Yet, at the same time, there is nothing that has brought more horror than religion. Nothing has made more peace and love than religion. Nothing has endangered fiercer hatred than religion. Nothing has made the brotherhood of man more tangible than religion. Nothing has been more bitterly enmity between man and man than religion. Nothing has built more charitable institution, more hospitals for man, and even for animals than religion. Nothing has deluged the world with more blood than religion." So you can have different opinions, and I think that he summed it up pretty well. There is good things being done in the name of religion. There is bad things being done in the name of religion. And that's the same for the last 20, 25 years in the world. You see clearly those trends are coming. And as we will see in the end, one way to try to mitigate that is to make the right kind of studies of religion. So to summarize, why we study religion and why it's important right now, it's because that the idea since Enlightenment that religion would die out and disappear, both in the society level and on the sort of community level and on the individual person's belief, has been proved wrong. Rather, it has been growing. And we still don't know all the factors behind that. And despite the fact that it's been seen so important at Indian universities, it's a very understudied phenomenon. So this book was not written in the way to answer all these questions. But why we have written it mainly is to start a debate in India, particularly, about why is the situation so poor when it comes to study of religion, and how can they do to mitigate that situation. Because without understanding religion, it's our belief. If you don't understand the religion, its effect, its forces on micro, meso, and macro level, you will not understand the world, and you're liable to make mistakes in both political and other areas. So you have to take religion into consideration. And despite all this, it's very understudied, as I said. And why is it understudied in India? I'll say more about that later, but time goes. Excuse me. The first factor is that the Indian education system was developed by the British during the colonial times. And in England, they did not have, at the time, religious studies at the universities. That was localized out to various colleges and so on. And the second reason is after colonization, then Nehru and Ambedkar particularly were very hostile against religion. And in maybe not so much religion itself, but whatever that is, but particularly Ambedkar, who you know more than I do, with his history coming up in the caste system, he was extremely negative to the Indian caste system, and he wrote very many times, like, nothing good can come in India as long as we have the caste system, and the caste system won't disappear as long as we're Hindus. So we want to sort of get rid of Hindus. And Nehru, he had his political schooling, you might say, from the Soviet idea and also later on from the China. He was very influenced there, which you also know, which we describe in the book here too. So thanks to that, even in the Constitution, the state was not allowed to give money to any institution that was giving religious studies. That's in the Constitution here, except for endowed institutions. So BHU would have been actually been accepted, but they still didn't carry that out. So the main aim of this book, as I said, is to start a discussion about these. The questions you have to ask yourself then, if you want to do more religious studies, there are very many questions. I should take the main ones here. To what extent is it possible for India to borrow ideas, to borrow setups of studies from the West and just move them into India? Is that possible? Is that what you want? Or to what extent does India has to develop their own type of religious studies? And as we will come to later, if you look at Malavia in here in BHU, he had the idea we should take the best of Western science and the best of Indian traditional wisdom and sort of mute that together. Is that possible to do in religious studies? As I said, we did interviews at the university here with quite a lot of professors and scholars, and most of them were very skeptical to what has come out of Malavia's vision for the university. So you have to ask yourself a few more questions. When you study religion, are you only after scientific knowledge, whatever that is? The term scientific is disputed, and we discussed that too here, but we can say that be as little normative as possible and little affected by ideology as possible. You're getting into the scientific view of it. Or should there also be extra scientific parts in it, like Malavia wanted, to create good citizens, good Indians, good Hindus, and not just the people who have knowledge about it? Should religious studies have a sociopolitical goal, like in India? Should it be tied up with some idea about what kind of future India do we want? Or should we leave that question open? And should we keep religion to the private sphere and at university only be looking at the facts? These are, I think, the main questions to be decided before you can decide what type of religious studies do you want to have in India. What is religion then? The definitions, I'll come to that soon. But is it one thing or is it many things? Can you frame a definition of religion that's workable or not? Okay, that's sort of top on a background scale. I should look at the structure of the book and go through the various chapters a bit. We start out by talking about the concept of religion and religiosity, because without some idea about what we're talking about, everything gets fuzzy. If you don't define first, then things get fuzzy. But we don't believe that there is any other definition of religion that's stipulated. We have to make up what a definition that fits for our projects. Different research projects might want to have different definitions of religion than we have, but we make one. We're going to come into that pretty soon, what that is. We want to make a distinction between theology, which is teaching a particular religion. Normally theology is defined as how to make people, or how to make, what is the best kind of religion we can have, what's the best kind of Christianity, what's the best kind of Hinduism, what's the best kind of Islam, and how those people going to be the best kind of Muslims and Hindus and so on. And that is not our interest here. We're discussing religion and we discuss religious study. So we want to have a non-confessional type of religious study. And on the part two, we go through our findings about what we have found when it comes to religious studies in higher education in India. That's part of the context for the rest of it. And then we focus primarily on Malavia in BHU, it's our case study, and Rabindranath Tagore in Vishabharati, which is another kind of case study, because they are the only two figures whose ideas has been institutionalized in terms of educational institutions. And we also make two case studies on two newer universities, Yadavpur University in Kolkata and Pondicherry University in Pondicherry. Because there they have the sociology department has created institutions or sub-centers for religious studies. Then we discuss, as part of the context also, the development in India, the sort of the socio-political development in India, particularly since 1947 on. And there is Nehru, Ambedkar on one side and Gandhi on the others, who had different ideas about how you should treat Hindus, which role Hinduism or religion should have in the Indian constitution and in the Indian land. And then we come with the suggestions for what you can do in the future in the end. Okay, that's the basic, simple structure of the book. We said that religion is an important part of society. We have to discuss if it's what kind of concept it is, if it can be understood in singularis, if it's only a Western concept, or if it's a concept you can apply to India, because a lot of the so-called post-colonial studies, they claim that religion is a term or is a phenomenon that cannot be applied outside the Western world, outside the Christian sphere. We don't agree. I think it depends on how you define religion, if you can apply it in the Indian context or not. And we like to talk about religion in terms of religious traditions. And we think it's possible to define it. And you should do it in this way. I get very short here now. We have about 30 pages in the book about this. Our belief in a good definition of religion is the following: that all religions are basically empirical. They sort of start out by some person, some religious genius, to use Weber's term, who has an experience, a very particular experience. An experience of a different world than the kind of world that we normally live in, than the empirical world. They have an experience of a transcendental, depending how we look at the word. And that experience is normally said to be ineffable, that they can't really say what it was of. But of course, religious geniuses, they can't just sit there. Even the Buddha got convinced that he has to tell people what he had experienced. So they go out and try to formulate what they have experienced. And normally what they have experienced is that the universe is divided in two spheres. One, our empirical sphere, where we sit now and we go buy milk and we take our kids to school and so on. And one transcendent sphere, which is above these. And the transcendent sphere, they experience to be absolutely ontologically valid, while these normal empirical spheres get inflated. It's not as real as the transcendental sphere. And also that the transcendental sphere is more valuable. It's absolute, whether the norms and values in this world are relative. So they claim, in other words, that they've seen a blueprint for how the universe is and for how human beings should live their lives, and how they should organize their lives, organize their family life, organize their societies, organize the world. So a religious tradition then is starting out by some religious genius who have an experience of a different world which is absolutely ontologically and normatively objective for him or her, and that tells him or her how we as humans should live and organize our society. And of course, when you have that kind of experience, when you have to externalize it in words, you have to do it in a language that people around you understand. If you're in India, you might have done it in Sanskrit before or in Hindi. If you're in Europe, you do it in a different language. Or if you're in some other place, you do it in different language. You have to do it in a cultural way so people can understand it. So you have different religious traditions. It grows out of externalizations that is culturally adapted so they can work in that area where the religious experiences was. Then, of course, things changes. There are people who accept what they say. You create an organization around that person. You create in the Western Church, here you can create a Mahat or whatever, so it grows. And you create buildings, and you create pictures, and they grow and grow. And sooner or later, you get what W. Smith calls a cumulative tradition. So I'm going to quote him here for you. He said, what you get is it's like a big basket, and people are putting in more and more things through history. More and more people who are pundits or who are priests or who are bishops, whatever, they interpret text and they put it into these baskets so it keeps growing. And he said, though, so what a religious tradition is, it's the entire mass of overt objective data that constitutes the historical deposit, as it were, of the past religious life of the community in question. Temples, scriptures, theological systems, dance patterns, legal and other social institutions, conversations, morals, codes, myths, and so on. Anything that can be and is transmitted from one person, one generation to another, and that the history can observe. So these religious traditions, they keep growing by time. And after a while, nobody can know it all. You have so many texts. You have so many statements from religious important people. You have so many ideas about mythology, ideology, pictures, and so on. So you get this big basket. So each and every time, what happens is that people who want to do something in the world act religiously. You go into this basket or into this pool and pick out what is suitable for you and use that in your preaching. Like you can see very typical in Islam today, that is extremely typical. You have the ayahs on the one hand. They can pick out a lot of things out of the Quran, the Hadith, and so on, that fits their ideology and that sort of prove that they are right. You have the Sufis on the other side. They go in, they pick out completely different parts of the traditions and make another kind of religion. So you get different Islams over history. I can't say that one is right, the other one is wrong. You can make a case for both of them if you're a skilled theologian. Same in Christianity, same in Hindu tradition. You can go in there and interpret it and make scriptural proofs and makes proofs for all the sort that your way of doing it is correct. So you have this bewilderment of traditions. We're going to come back to it. So to study religion, so in religious studies, you can study all those things. You can study texts, you can study people, what people think, what people do, what people feel. You can study what people do in the name of religion, artifacts, statues, paintings, whatever. So it's a huge field. You can have religious studies in medicine. You have Ayurvedic medicine that is based on Hindu or at least Vedic traditions and so on. So it's a huge field you can get into. But it's all based on, we think, experiences that has been abstracted out. So to make it very simple, religious traditions are sort of maps or blueprints for ways of life. And there can be very many associated with each sort of tradition in the umbrella tradition. There can be very many ways of life within Hinduism or within Hindu tradition, if you would include Buddhist and Jain and so on in that tradition too. And the same in Christianity. You can have very many ways of life, and they can all be argued for and are argued for. It's a way of life, according to the speaker of it, that is a right and the good way of life. If you live according to the tradition, or Sanatana Dharma if you want, you live the good and the right life, and you build the good and the right family, you build the good and the right community, you build the good and the right society. So there are blueprints for from individual lives to building up society. And they need to be studied. And to be a religious person, to make it quick here now, is a person who tries to cultivate him or herself in a way so he or she can experience the world according to that life work. So not just to have knowledge about it, that's not important. The important thing is that you socialize yourself so you actually spontaneously and naturally live that life. That's the definition of a religious person. One who tries to cultivate himself or herself in a way so she spontaneously, naturally experience the world through his or her tradition. So it's if you use the term what Aristotle called a phronesis, practical wisdom. It's not a theoretical wisdom to be religious, a practical wisdom. Okay, religious studies, it's also a disputed term. And historically, you can see what it has been. In the olden days, it was mainly that a guru or a priest or a mullah transmitted the theory to a disciple. So you're sitting there saying, this is what Islam is, this is what Hinduism is, and so on. And later on, from the 19th century, we started to get more scholarly religious studies on the universities. And after they studied basically old text, it was when the old texts in the East, India, China, and so on, were discovered by the colonials, and the science really started to come up. Before that, it has only been theology. And later, from the last 30 years, you also come into what they call studies of lived religion. That's when the social sciences, anthropology, psychology, sociology, have started to study not the tradition, not the texts, not the high traditions, but sort of study what actual, really living people think and do as their religion. And also, of course, you study artifacts in art and so on. And you can say, you can take it as one of my old professors. He made an example of Islam. He was an Islamologist. He said, is there one or many Islam? And he said, like Muslim theologians claim there is only one Islam. And if you push them enough, he said, I mean, say, lock them into a basement. You take a mullah from Iran, from Saudi Arabia, and from 10 different places. You lock them into a basement and feed them only alcohol and pigs. And it is, haram. It's not allowed for them. After a while, they would agree on a certain number of principles, which is the one Islam. Okay. You go out and interview those 1.2 billion Muslims in the world. Is there any of those people who have that Islam as their religion? No. They have different types of Islam as their religion. And the same is true in Christianity, and I'm sure in Hindu traditions too. If you go out and actually study what people say is Hinduism, or what people should do as Hindus, and you compare that to those people who have studied the high tradition and want to argue for the essence of Hinduism, which are still the same, you're going to see that nobody has that as a religion. So the living tradition is what we think you should study for various reasons. And that is constantly changing. It's changed with the context, as I said before. When the context changes, the religion has to change. Like what it is to be a Hindu today is different than what it was 50 years ago or it was 100 years ago. If you ask people what it is to be a good Hindu, they would change different answers because the tradition, the hard society around them changed, then it changed what it is to be a good Indian and what it is to be a good Hindu. So you can study everything of these levels in religious studies. You can study texts, high traditions, you can read the Gita, whatever you want to have. You can study lived religion, if you're in the sociology department or in the anthropology department, the psychology department. You can try study objects if you're in a geology department. So you can study more or less everything that has a connection to your tradition at the university, which makes it, of course, very, very big area. I come back to that then. Religious studies in India, it's part 2 of the book. We go through what we can find in India, and I said the main things are Benares, Indian University, Ishbharati, Yadapur, and Pondicherry, and we make some case studies of them. And then we also summarize the socio-political history of India after 47. And we discuss how all those changes has to do with globalizations and modernizations in the world. And not the least, the process of the last 15 years with a strong increase of Hindu nationalism. Well, I mean, RSS is an old tradition, but they have been coming up stronger the last 15, 20 years, and the victories of BJP that has had strong changes or strong implications on people's religiosity, both on micro, meso, and macro level. We also summarize the education commissions that has been, including the last one that came out in its full report now last year, I think, from Modi, which came out after this book was written. We haven't taken that up there. There's been about 5 commissions from the 30s and onward. And the interesting thing with those are that in all those commissions, in particular the Ramakrishna Commission, they argue for introducing religious studies in universities and in the lower third. They make a distinction between education of religion and education about religion. And they say education in or of religion should not be done in the school system, should be done outside. But education about religion can and should be done within the school system and in the universities. Nothing of that has happened. Why hasn't that happened? All of the commissions recommended. And we still think that it's the legacy of Nehru and Ambedkar, particularly, that is behind that. But we discussed that in the more seriously. And we describe as that's what we think is important, the development of the social sciences in India, in particular the development of sociology. And that has been, generally speaking, fairly poor, I might say, in India. There has been very many good Indian sociologists, but not in India. They have moved to Europe and to the States and so on. Most people working in India has not made too much of a print or remark in the global study of sociology. But Indian sociologists abroad has been very, very good. But in India, not. You should speed up here. And we have also that the university system in India has been growing tremendously the last number of years. Like, I have just some figures. 2000, there was about 200 colleges in India. 2011, there were 20,000 colleges in India. 21 was private first, and 220 was private later of the universities. And 2019, you had almost 900 universities, of which 330 were private. This incredible expansion of the higher education system has, according to very many who studied it, resulted in low quality. I can give you one quote here. We have many quotes on that. If you Google useless educations, when you find thousands of hits, and almost all of them going to be talking about India. Here is a guy who is professor at BITS, his name is Pushkar. He said, most institutions in India, whether public or private, offer poor quality education. Public institutions are in bad shape due to poor funding, rapid politicization in appointments of key officials, faculty shortage, nepotism in faculty, hiring lack, and autonomy, and other factors such as corruption. And it's a depressing reading when you go into study what varies even from the government and down, when they study various schools on various levels, how the picture is very, very poorly functioning. Teachers don't show up, students don't show up, teachers are underpaid. When you're going to appoint people, you don't go after a meritocratic system, you go who can pay to get the job, and so on and so forth. And that's a downhill for any academic institutions. Once you leave the meritocracy way, it's go downhill. Once you grow faster than you can have competent staff, you go downhill. And that's what happened with quite a number of Indian institutions. There are a few IITs and so on. You can have maybe 20, 30 institutions in India that is very good quality, but many others has very poor quality. So that's what you have to. And also, a lot of those private institutions are there only for profit. They don't care if the student learns anything. They want to make money on taking the tuitions from the students. And one way of doing that, which is pointed out by many, is by saying that you not only give them education, you give them Hindu value education also, which is taking a page out of Malavia's book, but doing it in a very strange sense. I give it a poor version of that too. What you see as another thing that's happened, which you can't get into now, during the last 20 years also, is what sociologists call culturalization of religion. Like, you can take the examples of Kolkata. As long as the Communist Party was running Kolkata, official people who was employed by the state in any position was not allowed to go to the Durga Puja, was not allowed to be there in the official position as an employee. They couldn't give any money to support the Durga Puja and so on. When Mamatai took over later, she said, Durga Puja is not religion. Durga Puja is a cultural event. So it's not breaking with secularization to let people from our offices take part in the official capacity of being the official role they're employed for. It's nothing to break with secularization to give money to the Durga Puja. And that's a trend we've been seeing quite a lot over India the last 20 years, that from the political level, they've culturalized religion. They moved from being very many sort of Hindu traditional areas, that moved from being religious to be cultural here, which means that you have secularized India in a sense. If you move something from the religious sphere into the cultural sphere, you secularize it. So you can say that India is secularized, although there is so much religion everywhere, because you culturalized it. Which is one thing that needs to be studied more than it is, but it's studied. Okay, time flies here. A way forward, there are 3 ways, we think, what you can do if you want to put religious studies on the map of India. One is, the most ambitious, is to make centers for religious studies, where you have both humanities and social science working together. You make a center, they exist in Europe and they exist in the United States and places. You have sociologists, you have theologists, you have people from different areas, philosophers, who work together, both on texts and on actually people living and what people are doing, what they think, what they do in the name of religion, and why they act as they act, and what social consequences it gets when they act. That's very ambitious. It takes quite a bit of money, it takes political support, and it takes qualified staff. It's possible to do in India. You have enough qualified people, you have enough money, but if the political will is there, I'm very dubious about it. The second level is to make smaller centers. You have one around humanities or one around social scientists, and collect people who are good and who are interested in religion in various aspects, and let them work together. Because individual people, there are very few individual people who are strong enough to create an environment. You need an environment. You need many people who study the same area to get it good. So you get seminars, you get publications, and you get all these kind of things that you need for a study. And that also takes money, because you need to be up to date with literature and so on to do it well. And you can do these both in a sort of Western frame if you want only science, but it's no problem to do it in a Malavia thing, to also have a part of develop good character people. But it should be up in the front with it. And of course, the last thing is to look at what departments have religious studies, like here, like in Vishwabharati, like in Jadapur and in Pondicherry, and put in money in them, hire good staff, and bring it up from that subject, whether it's philosophy or sociology or whatever. But that's the easiest way of doing it. But you still have to be careful to get good people and be meritocratic way of doing it, and get political and economic support from the university. And my guess is that the first is not possible in India at the moment. The second might be, because when I looked in the Modi text for the new education policies, there seems to be, he take Nalanya as an ideal. He said that Nalanya is an old Indian university that he tries to embrace again. So if he's serious, it should be possible to apply for funding to start some kind of center for religious studies. That would be important, and people would benefit from it, and India would benefit from it, both politically and other ways. Okay, I have summarized more or less what we say in the book. You can get the arguments in detail by reading it. Anybody has any questions? I am ready to answer them. Oh, okay. Sorry. That's a good point. On the front page of the book, it's Professor Clemens Cavallin, me, and Professor Sudha Sitaraman from Pondicherry. We have been the people who main put together the book, but we have gotten a lot of input from other people. When it comes to Banaras, Sushil Kumar, Dr. Sushil Kumar there, has been doing a lot of work for us, and he was very helpful in our religion on campus projects too. He did a lot of works and helped us to organize it. In Vishwabharati, Professor Asha Mukherjee has been very helpful and supporting and giving us a lot of information and data about the institute there. And in Jadapur, Professor Ruby Sain and also Professor Ferdinando Sardella from Stockholm University, who has been working with Ruby Sain in Calcutta, has been giving us a lot of things to work with. So they have provided us with a lot of ground-breaking information that we could have, which we have used and put into the book. Thank you. I was dropping that bit first. That was very unpolite of me. Anybody has any questions? Oh, sure. You're welcome to come here. I got to be out of your way.
There are questions in the chat box. Thank you for your very enlightening lecture. But you have made some observations which I find rather exceptionable. There are certain assumptions which are not true. The first assumption is that the post-colonial Indian state was secular. This is a great myth. Post-colonial India was a kind of secular. This is a myth. And I would like to draw your attention to the book written by Perry Anderson, The Indian Ideology. I don't know whether you have read that book. So, in that book, the so-called secular Nehru is exposed in his true colors. He draws our attention to the fact that on the eve of 14th August, the Brahmins from Kerala were summoned, and the birth of Indian nation state took with the performance of Brahminical rituals. Only Ambedkarites and non-Brahminical Marxists know this fact. The Brahminical Marxists hide this fact about Nehru. Secondly, you said that Indian state and Nehru, again you pointed out Nehru and praised or blamed him for the neglect of religious studies in India. So Nehru's anti-confessionalism was, he was not an anti-confessionalist. You would read his works. If you read Perry Anderson quotes from his various works to point out, to expose his religiosity and how deeply he was committed to the Brahminical idea of India. Okay. And second thing, the so-called progressive measures taken by Indian state, like Hindu Code Bill, ended up perpetuating the hegemony of Hinduism, because under the Hindu Code Bill, all the communities, Buddhists, Jainas, Sikhs, were governed by this Hindu law of marriage. So how this, the apparently secular state ended up enforcing the hegemony of religion, or to be precise, Brahminical religion. Thank you.
Okay. What I'm trying to say, and I thought, was not that post-colonial India was a secularized country. What I try to say is that when I read Nehru, and when I read Ambedkar, and when I read parts of the Constitution, Indian Constitution, it's very clear that what they aimed for was a secularized India. I am very clear that they failed miserably, and that there are very many reasons for that, not the least Brahmanical reasons. So if I said that India was secularized, that was not what I meant. But they had an aim to do that, but it never actually got off their feet. I should read this book later.
So do you find that this problem would be inculcated in religious studies, and it would inculcate that religion and dharma would be studied together? Can we basically provide a framework via dharma or via religions that could be studied? My second question is that even in the last century we had a very kind of utopia, to say ideal in the form of universal religion. So, do you still find in the contemporary India and religious identity on the peak, like that idea of universal religion? Universal religion on one hand and religious identity on the one hand. So, how do you look at this? And the third challenge I personally face is that these are universities, there are IITs, there are IIMs, and there are aims. So what would be the role of religion in such institutions which are basically secular? What would religion play kind of role? And in this that we have seen that in Indian institutions, we have seen that humanities or also the religion 2.0 playing a very big role in terms of secular or liberal education. So how do you look at this thing?
Okay, I try my best. The problem between religion and Dharma is, as far as I can see, a conceptual problem. I know because if when I talk to people in India, a lot of times say that we don't have religion, we have Sanatana Dharma. And I even talk to professors at various universities who say, no, we have no religion here. We don't teach religion, we teach Buddhism. The way we try to get around that here is to make a definition of religion, as I try to frame it very simply before, as a way of life, in which way it squares very well with Dharma. There are still numbers of problems. When you talk about Dharma, is there one or are there many? And one opinion about among professors in India, at least, of religious studies, they say that in the world there are various dharmas, Buddhist dharma, there is Hindu dharma, and so on. But in reality, there is only one dharma in the sort of the cosmic, or what you want to call it, sense. And I completely can agree with that. If there is a cosmic dharma, then when human beings try to get hold of it, we always have to make our own versions of it. Because as humans, we never have any pure, direct experience of things. We always experience everything around us through our, what we call in the book, patterns of interpretation. We are socialized in to see things in different ways. You can see it feministic, Marxistic, Indian, Western. I mean, you have a way that you're socialized in with your experience and interpret facts and identities around you. And that will be the same with for the religious seers when they experience Dharma. So in a way that the way we want to have religion as a way of life, and we argue it's pretty good that you can do that in Christianity and other traditions also, then there is no problem with Dharma and religion. But a lot of people in India, they believe there's a problem. They say, in Hinduism, we don't have any church, we don't have any founder, we don't have any single book, we don't have this, that, and the other, i.e., we're not a religion. But it's not necessary to have those things to be a religion. About utopia, you said, about the universal religion. That's been in utopia, religiosi perennis has been in utopia for maybe 1,000 years. And I think that the idea behind that is one version of what I said before, that human beings have experiences of God or the transcendent world, but as soon as they try to convey it to others, you have to externalize it in cultural frameworks, in cultural ways, so that it will be understood. So you get many. But behind it, there is one flow out. Talk to a Sufi, he says there is that. Talk to a mystic in any tradition, and they claim there is that. If I think that's realistic to achieve that, no. If you look historically in the world, and you can go back to even pre-Christian times, religion has always been used by various political and other leaders to identify you, make it identities. You are an X, he's a Y. you are the right, he's the wrong. You are the inside, he's the outside. That kind of thing has happened throughout history, and I am very reluctant to think that it's going to stop. I'm not very optimistic about that. And what the role of religion in secular institutions, there might not be any. But you can have religious studies without having a religion in the secular institutions. But you can also, at IIT, like in IIT Madras, they have obligatory courses for all the engineers in Vedic values. That will take him. On IIT here in Banaras, they also have Hindu value courses. They're not obligatory yet, but they're on the way to be that for the engineer students. But you don't need to have that. But you can have religious studies. You can study religion as a social phenomena in IITs and in other secular institutions. That's no problem.
Hello. Now I would like to some participant from online, uh, respected respected Professor Gangadhar D. A. Gangadhar, formerly head of the Department of Philosophy and Religion, BHU. Sir.
Should I start? Should I speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Am I audible? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm really pleased with the speaker who has given a very elaborated ideas on study of religion and religious studies. It is very praiseworthy in the sense that he has brought out a clear picture of various studies of religion, not only India, but in the globe. So far as the comment made by Professor Bagde, it gave me some inspiration also. But I would just submit to the speaker and to the audience also that the study of religion has got so much interest these days, not as before, because we are living now in a multicultural societies where people belonging to the various faiths are required to have a harmonious way of life. That's why the questions like having religion and being religious give so much importance. And people, they are for and against religion because of their certain interest, as I feel. Because in the university's education system, one is to be academic, not as a practitioner. This will solve the problem when we differentiate between the two phases of studying religion. Because it is very clear that these are the two things, having religion and being religious. This is very important issue, that how we should understand the meaning, the concept regarding having religion and being religious. This will solve many problems, because at this juncture, if I make a very notorious comment on the side of religion, that when Marx used the definition of religion as a opium of the people, should we, I just laugh also myself, should we say that politicians poison the religion? Is it not? Politics is a poison of religion. So these are certain points, very conclusive and very narrow-minded, that if we start religion in a different ways. In fact, the speaker has given the emphasis on the various kinds of studies regarding religion is being conducted in the whole world. So far as India is concerned, it was because of Max Muller, I feel, as I know, that he gave a way to understand a scientific understanding of religion. This was the issue that the scholars all over the world have joined hand in order to analyze religion, in order to study religion. And in that sense, it was made very clear later on after Max Muller that there should be an objective understanding of religion. One should not be biased, one should not be religious, one should not be um, one-sided, having one-sided view. So this way, I find this lecture very important, very beneficial, and eye-opening. In the Banaras University, we have been teaching this religion in various ways. In the way of comparative study of religion, as this was initiated by Professor Radhakrishnan, his lecture on religion East and West. He motivated people in India to open the Department of Comparative Religion first in Vishwabharati University, Shantiniketan, Banaras Hindu University, and in other parts of the country. So people from this land started academically their interest in studying religion. So thank you very much, the speaker and the audience both. Thank you.
To the question of, if I understood right, to what extent studying religions can lead to harmony between religions. I'm not too positive about that. That is something that, as I said before, those various education commissions that's been appointed in India, they've all said that if people just know more about each other, they're going to be less friction between the tradition. But that knowledge about gives understanding of that hasn't been proved through history. You can know a lot about your enemy and still think he or she is your enemy. But it certainly wouldn't hurt. And I would think that if you try to put that sort of extra scientific goal into study of religion, that make people not just know about, but also understand how the other persons are thinking and acting, it might not hurt at least, it might even be good. If you can have an objective understanding of religion, I basically don't think, even if you have a strict idea about objective, I don't think you can have an objective understanding of anything, really. It should be mainly theoretical physics or so on, where you're looking at subatomic particles. But as soon as you get into the world, your own view is tainted by you being a man, you being a woman, you being a Hindu, you being a Christian, you being whatever, class, caste, and so on. You can't get away from that. The one person that actually tried a lot, I've been working with a lot, was a German philosopher in the late 1800s called Edmund Husserl. He spent all his life trying to come to absolute truth, and he wrote about 50,000 pages during the time doing it. And I'm afraid to say that the project was a failure, although he got quite far on the way. I hope I was some kind of answer to you.
Now, I would like to another participant from online mode, Professor Ganesh Prasad Das, formerly head of the
Thank
department
you, Rajiv. Rajiv, thank
from
you.
University.
But my suggestion is that the young scholars and students present over there, let them pose their questions. If time permits, take up my question, which is already in the chat box. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for such an enlightening and moving lecture. We are moved and puzzled at the same time. There is one thing I'm very much concerned about, the study of religion, because study of religion is not something that you have to semantically analyze and you could understand and conceive the whole gesture of religion as such. Because when we go to study the religion, then we must engrasp certain idea, including the cultural and traditional norms as well, because there might be some practices which have some metaphysical assertion rather than political gesture. Your lecture has suggested that politics in religion, I mean political implication in religion rather than metaphysical assertion in religion, because that is quite perplexing as well, because I would quote Edward Said. He has written a wonderful book, Orientalism, and he says that when Western they try to understand the religions in India or some other continent, they think they have certain patronizing gesture as they have certain essential conjecture. They think that they might be some have pitiful thoughts over the other sociological structure or practices of the colonized nation, particularly if I would claim that. So my question is then, how would you subjugate the entire turmoil of religion across the world and within the India, just by juxtaposing the metaphysical assertion and only gripping the political gesture or some empirical implication in religion? Because as Voltaire says that there is nothing more contrary than religions and its clergymen, because it seems like we are changing the bottle but keeping the wine same. It means something like that, because we are not here essentially understanding and construing the essential part of nature. We are just trying to the semantically analyze the entire gesture of religion. Thank you so much.
Really got the question in that remark there, but one part was, I think, about the problem of metaphysics. And I would say that when you study religion, I would think that you have to assume a stance of what we call methodological agnosticism. Like had to assume that whether gods or transcendent spheres will exist or not exist, that's not anything for science. The only thing we can know of as scientists are immanent phenomena, it's just things in the world. We can, like, if I have an experience of Krishna or Shiva, that experience is in the world, and it can be analyzed by psychologists and psychiatrists, but not Shiva himself, it's the experience itself. So we have to deal with what's in the world and have to leave the rest outside. Edward Said, I didn't understand your point with that, and can you repeat? Because I know Edward Said, but one thing that is in the way of our understanding of, like, India is the thing he points out, that the European and Western scientist, or people generally, has always made out the Oriental countries as the opposite mirror image of themselves. So we have a built-in sort of negative view, or a possibly exotic view on those countries. But that I think is to quite some extent passed away right now. Not so much vis-a-vis the Islamic world. There is still a lot of Islamophobia and negative trends. But towards India, I think in the Western world, at least people at the university are not negatively inclined to, or don't have negative stereotypes about Indians. But I didn't catch it. If you had any other questions, if you can formulate it a little more precise, I'll try to answer it.
So I have a question, and that why we should just accept religious studies in the education system, because if we see that what religion is, or what is the consequence of religion so far for a so long time, because we see that you say in your introductory time that it is contradictory that a person is religious in their private life, means they preach religions in their private life, and when they come to the educational system, then religion is not teaches there. So what we notice that most of the time we spend in our houses are out of the educational system. We only just come for 5 or 6 hours to read in the educational system. So if that 18-hour can't teach the practice of religions, the goal of religions to that thing, then how can this 5 or 6 hours change it? What is the role of family system? That can't it yield the value of religion to it? And once you are focusing on religion, can we not accept it as the alternative to religion, morality, and the constitutional morality, and the belief in the this world? Because you have referred Malviya ji and the Gandhi ji and Rabindranath Tagore. So what they actually do, they actually focus on the condition of humans, that humanity actually is the center in their path. So I think that humanity, morality, belief in this world, that the condition of the man should be uh, for the betterment of the man. That is the goal of ultimate any type of education. So I think that religion should be it is already in the private life of the man. So it is unnecessary to bring that and focus, because we see that and you refer towards the religious scriptures. What there are a lot of contradictions in the scriptures. Who will just who will be the authority to decide that what is right in the religious scriptures? We okay, sir, I am just concluding. So actually, these are the questions that I am seeking. And in the same way, you say that if we do not accept religion, then it will lead to the suicides and the corruptions. So if a person who is practicing 18-hour in his home, and his family system and all this practice religion, is not actually teaching morality, how to behave properly. So what we see that does he corrupt? So it is not coming in the behavioral and in the practical. So how can we accept it? This is my.
I'm not sure I completely got your point, but one point was that we should study religion for the betterment of man, and that's one way of doing it. But what I've been saying is that the primarily thing at the university is to study religion as you study any other social phenomenon, period. Then you can add, if you want, like Malaviya said, courses on values and so on. But that's not the primary thing. The primary thing is that you need to know what religion is, how religion work in society, to be able to understand the rest of society. Like take the example, I said 1979, when there was a revolution in Iran, everybody was taken by surprise. Everybody there was looking at, there was a communist movement, the communists are political, you had to keep communists under surveillance. CIA had over 1,000 people in Iran during the time. Nobody was looking into what the mullahs or the religious people were doing, because religion was not on the radar. They were taken by surprise. And then we had a series of effects of religious thinking. So I think you study religion, if you're in the social science, to learn what does happen in society, what the effect of people being religious, what the effect of communities being religious, what the effect of societies being religious, and it's important to know that. In the humanities, there you study religious text maybe. You don't need to have any other agenda. You don't need to come in to say, there are contradictions, fine. There's contradictions in almost everything. You point them out. You don't have to be normative. You don't say this is better than that. You have like in theology, in biblical studies, you have like at least 100 PhDs written on each verse of the Bible. It's fine. People learn and you build up a common knowledge about that. Not that it's my thing to do that. But I think that in India, what you primarily need is you need good sociologists, good political scientists, possibly good psychologists, good anthropologists, to work with religions, to see what effects do they have, how do people use religion in the political life, in the private life, in the communal life, how do they use it and for what purpose. That's an important knowledge to have. And then other knowledge, or maybe not important, but to have knowledge for the sake of knowledge is part of the university agenda. And that's been so ända sedan Malaya.
Now I would like to request Sharendra Vikram Singh to ask his question.
Namaste, Professor. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
Thank you to all the panel members for granting me this opportunity. So I'd like to move on to the question. You have mentioned about Nehruvian secularism in your paper. I could just read an excerpt about it. So much of the dissent against Nehruvian secularism is now being traced to 90s liberalization of the privatization era. Also, since this is an objective study, the 2019 Deloitte survey states that the millennials or the Gen X, Gen Y and Z that is the current age bracket of the young scholars, they are disillusioned, not just in India but around the world. So in that purview, what do you think are the challenges and the pragmatics of religious study in India? Also, if I'm allowed to make just one more point that I would like you to shed some light on, uh, about the compartmentalization of science and religion and the fluidity involved therein. Where do you think a line should be drawn, if any, as such, so that we don't fall into the lull of pseudosciences? Thank you, sir.
Yes. Hello, Sharendra. Your sound was not so audible, so we are sorry to reply. So yes, now.
Yeah, am I audible? Is it clear now? Hello?
Wait. We're trying to do that. Yes, speak now.
Yes, am I audible? Is it clear now?
Yes.
Thank you. So I was raising this point about Nehruvian secularism, which I found to be discussed in a little in the excerpt which we are handed out. So much of the dissent against Nehruvian secularism is now being traced to the 90s liberalization or the privatization era. Also, since this is an objective study, the Deloitte survey of 2019 states
Sharendra,
that millennials, not
Sharendra, you
just
are
in
not so audible. I think you should maintain little distance from your speaker. Hello.
Am I audible now?
Yes, now speak.
I was just raising this point about this dissent against this Nehruvian secularism. It is now being traced to the 90s liberalization era. The Deloitte 2019 survey states that the millennials, Zen, Y, and Z, that are the age bracket of current scholars around the world, they seem to be disillusioned. In that purview, what do you think are the challenges and the pragmatics of religious study in India? Also, if you could shed some light on the compartmentalization of science and religion and the fluidity involved therein, do you think that a line should be demarcated? If if the answer is yes, where should that line be demarcated so that we don't fall into the lull of pseudosciences that it often happens? Thank you.
Sir?
Yes, I agree with you that a lot of the dissatisfaction with the Nehruvian secularism has been coming since the 90s. And I can look into the book there, but before that there was more accepted. And that has to do, I think, with the growth of what you might call Hindu nationalism and populism in India. The line between religion and science, I don't really know what to say about that, because I don't think you can put a strict line there. What you can do is that if you're a scholar of religion who is religious by yourself, like for example Fernando Sadella, who was part of our book here, who is a avid Hindu. What you can do is, like for example, he did in his PhD. You are very clear about where you stand yourself, and you discuss quite a bit of the problems you had by having this religious tradition and working on religion. So I think that's the only thing you can do. You cannot get out of your skin and be objective in that sense. You have to make clear what your point of view is, where you come from, and how you try to deal with the possible biases you have. Thank you.
Sir, we have another questions from Dr. Prasanta Shukla, who is the Assistant Professor of the Department of Philosophy, Lucknow. Religious studies in India are pursued in details manner with 5 broad distinct perspectives: anthropological, historical, sociological, psychological, and philosophical. From this standpoint is an added advantage. Esteemed speaker, yours may specify that from which point of view you are claiming that religious studies are not pursued in Indian context. Yes, sir.
I would say that religious studies aren't pursued enough from any of those points of view. I know there are examples of all those points of views in India, but it's very little and very far apart, and not being done, I would say, on an international standard, very good. But I mean, as you're right, you can pursue religious studies from the multiple methodological ways, and also from a multiple number of theoretical ways, and also from a multiple number of sort of ideological positions. Like feminist here is more like a normative position than anything else. You can do it from that point of view, and there's no problem with that. The more points of views we can see of a phenomenon, the more we learn about it.
We have one more question, so please you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful lecture. India is a secular state, so it's good to have studies for centers for religious studies, of course. And secularism means treating all religions in an equal way, sarva dharma samabhava. But it does not mean it does not give equal right to every religion to practice their extreme religious practices. For example, the hijab law, which is going on, which was broke out in South India, which is going on in every part of India, they are fighting in the name of constitutional rights. But we cannot produce religious extremists in the name of constitution, in the name of secularism. So as a secular state, it is good to have centers for religious studies, of course, I agree. But we cannot recommend extreme religious practices in the universities and in the schools. So my question is, do you recommend religious practices or promoting religious ideologies in the universities other than religious studies? That's my question.
Okay. I did not dwell on the term secularization in my speech, which we do to some extent in the book. And that is almost as difficult as the term religion. Yes, India is, according to the constitution, a secular state and also a socialist state, according to the preamble. But secularization or secularity means something very different in India from what it meant by the fathers of sociology in Europe in the late 1800s. There, they basically meant that religion should be taken out of the public sphere of society, and preferably also taken out of the minds of everybody in the society. It should be finished. In India, secularization, and there was a bit of debate between Nehru and Ambedkar on one side and Gandhi on the other side. They had different opinions about that. They mean equal treatment of all religions. All religions were treated equal. But you never get to the conclusion about what equal should mean. Equal is also a very tricky term. Should we give the same amount of money to all religions? Should we give money in terms of the proportional size of them? Should we give the same help with institutional build-up and so on? And there's been studies on how in the Indian state the last 50 years has been treating different religions. And all of those that have been done by Pew, for example, in the United States, show that Hinduism has been treated much, much better in very many ways than Buddhism, the Sikhs, and so on. And how far does the right, because you have religious freedom, which is a different term. According to the Constitution of India, there is religious freedom in India. How far should religious freedom go? And that the latest 2 weeks in Karnataka now, where they have been banning hijab from girls in schools, is taken up, as you say, as that. But that's again a different question. And that's been the same argument in Europe. How far does your religious freedom take you? And that's basically the question of, if you have, as all nations that are secularized in their constitution, they want to divide their state in a secular sphere and a religious sphere. And the religious freedom is within the religious sphere, not the secular sphere. In the secular sphere, everybody should be equal, period. The same laws should be applied for everybody. And in the religious sphere, you can have different way of treating people. So the question is the school the public sphere, or is the school a private sphere? Because they are normally in the middle. The school has two tasks: to educate people and to socialize people. And the socialization is in the private. In Sweden, for example, where the religious sphere is very limited and the private sphere is very large, For a while, tram drivers were not allowed to have a turban on if they were Sikhs, because there was not religious freedom in the public sphere, and that was the public sphere. They could have the turban on home, but now they expanded that so they can do that. So, and it's a school, that's what the question comes down to. Are the schools in Karnataka purely public, or are they private also? You cannot argue in the constitutional way that you have a freedom of religious expressions in the public sphere. But in India, people have been doing that, and they get away with it. And that has to do with this culturalization of religion too. So it's different, tricky questions here, which I can't answer honestly. A lot of the things against hijab in India and in the rest of the world is based on Islamophobia.
Due to the lack of time now, I would like to request Professor D.N. Tiwari, formerly professor and head of the Department of Philosophy and Religion, Banaras Hindu University, to preside this session. Sir. Yes, sir.
Respected Chairman of the Department, Prof. Mishra, Professor Sender, and Madam Sender from Sweden, so many scholars, Professor P.V. Singh, Professor P. Singh, Professor Das, Professor Gangadhar, and so many scholars are there online. And here before me, there are scholars of my department. They are all my colleagues and my research scholars. Anand Arvind ji, so Rajan was also there. So actually I thought that this was a session especially devoted to Professor Sander's introduction to his latest book on future of religious studies in India. But the way he presented and the topic on which he presented about his book, and his book itself was on religious studies and the present Indian mindset, you know. So this all make this session very interesting and very enriching. I am thankful to Professor Sander and to all the scholars asking questions, very important questions that needs to be replied. And I think that very difficult to come to a agreeable conclusion. So what happens? The Abrahamic religious scholars, they think less about their own country and more about India's religious studies. And they run so many programs also in India. So you will imagine that what religious practices is not in the globe, you will all, and more than that, practices, religious practices you will get in India. So very difficult to understand India. But you see, The uniqueness of Professor Sanders' way is that he bases his studies, what he calls social scientific approach to religious phenomena. So this is a new, otherwise so many types of religious studies since Durkheim, Babylon, and is coming out from the West. But from the Indian outset, you will not find any book like that, Future of Religious Studies in India, because we are already teaching. I know I have visited almost all the universities of India, where we have courses, be undergraduate and graduate both, about the religions and comparative religions both, and we are teaching successfully. Our purpose is not to convince others, not persuasive, to convert someone into the some religious tradition, but to let the students know about what are the basic faiths of different sort of religions, so that they can be aware of, they cannot be deluded about the way of life they are living, or about choosing the way of life they have to choose in future. That's why there is no conflict in Indian scholars' minds and all about religious studies or future of religious studies. Even in the name of religious studies, you will find here these religious studies are run either by the Islamic institutions or by Christian institutions. So I will come to the book later on, but since I want to come to an introduction so that you can understand the position, the situation in which this book has come. So why the Abrahamic religions think about religious practice? Because we know it is a Hindu dominant, Hindu majority country, and they have, perhaps they might have some reason that if they might have been converted into all Christianity or Islam, they all are trying. But this is none of the goal of this book or the scholar you were listening, Professor Alexander. His observation is based on scientific, this means empirical findings. Empirical findings. But these scholars who have collaborated papers in that book, they are also known to me, they are good scholars, and it is compiled by 3 scholars, Professor Alexander, Kevlin and Sudha Sitaraman. So we know Sudha Sitaraman, Kevlin also visited this department many times. He has presented papers also on religious studies, scientific religious studies like that. So he was throughout finding some empirical proofs and the evidence and justifications about the religious practices. So on the basis of observations, they want to search about the future of philosophy, future of religion in India also. Because in the West and also in the Arabian countries, what is practiced Islam in Arabian countries is not the same in Pakistan and is not the same in India. Similar is the case with Christianity. What is practiced in America is different from what is practiced in other part of UK and other countries, and that is in India also. But the thing is that if the religious studies is getting unpopularity in the West, they are trying to search some prospect in India. So this is also a goal. But the book is not intending to such a work. So for this, for last 15 years, he is constantly visiting so many places in India, all the corners of India, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, Kerala, and other cities. He used to consult so many prophets, so many priests, so many so-called godmen, and their institutions run by the religious persons. And you know, no doubt that in Indian tradition, living human person, the worship of the living person is prohibited. But now the godmen are declaring themselves as avatar and everything. So it is, they are saying Guru market, Guru market. But I am not feeling easy to accept this word. Because this marketing of the religion came only from ISKCON. So the saint was there, attached with India, but it was ISKCON is an American company. And the employees here who chant so many, who perform so many religious rites and other things, they are paid in US dollar from there. And the dollar collected by this market is sent to the treasury of the America and other countries. So we Indians, we also perform religious practices there for enhancing their dollars. Not for us. So this is how the Guru mission here in India started, some by Chinese, some by Americans, some by others. And I'm not going on these things. Some Indian saints are also emerging. They are declaring themselves as God. But here you see Sai, and they are worshipped none less than the God. But this is not our vein, our essential vein. And in the name of the religious studies, if you say that we are also studying religious, so you see here, we study the traditional wisdom in Sanskrit, Prachya Vidya. SBD, Prachya Vidya, Dharma Vidya Shankar. We have all the traditional wisdom studies, from Veda to the different arts and other things we have there. In my department also we have comparative religion. But our motto is to protect our practices, our traditional wisdom. So you know, practices may change time to time. There may be some political power, some political ideology. And now you see so many ideologies are floating. And we are not in a position to decide which one. So a student asked, what is the difference between the religion of the other religions and Indian or Hindu religion? So you see, almost all who are serious scholars know that Hinduism, what we called you can say in contrast with Abrahamic religion, it is moral and spiritual practices. So it is Brahmanic. And Brahmanic also, when the people used to listen this word, they just react. Oh, what is the Brahmanic? Is it creation of the Brahmins? Like that. So they can, no doubt. But the Brahmanic means the, 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 the moral and spiritual uh, way of life. So Hinduism, Sanatan, is a way of life. And the beauty of this is, it is not a, it is a religion. You can say that it is a dharma. Dharma means, here you have to understand dharma in two ways. You see, dharma, religion, and secularism is defined in such an extended way that it has no its single definition. You can extend it, oh, secular, I am a secular. Why secular? In relation to a particular idea, in relation to a particular society. So secularism, they extend up to anything, even secularism at the ideas, secularism of the practices, and so many things are emerging. And likewise, religion you can extend to what is in practice, not only the worship of God, the belief in the book, or the belief in the, so these three in the prophet, so Abrahamic religion, the religion is well defined. There is no doubt about the definition of it. Any Abrahamic religion is religion because it has three basic faiths. You can say basic dogma also. The basic faith of monotheistic God, a book, and a prophet through which the book is revealed. But there is no book dogma in India. There is no prophet dogma in India, and there is no theological dogma. Most of you are atheists, but you are good men, because your traditional wisdom is to keep your mind free from the captives of any practices. And you practice free from all the allegiances. So this way you can reach to the spiritual goal. So you have to free your mind from all the religious dogmas. This is what we call Hinduism. Here there is no dogma. One can worship a snake, one can worship a scorpion, frog, tree, anything. There is no theological dogma. Only in later Hinduism, in influence with the Christianity, and to counter them, they also accept a Godhead. They also accept one book, Gita, and like that. They also accept, but no. General majority of the Indian minds, they do not accept that that is the only religion. Shaivism is only religion. Shaivism is only religion. Krishnavism is the only religion. Vaishnavism is the only religion. Oh, mother. So, let me see. So many sects of Hinduism are there. Very difficult to define Hinduism. How can you define? So if you have to define at least what is Hinduism, you have to keep purview all the different sects who have already emerged, who are emerging. You can also create a sort of religious practices, and you can say that I am the founder of that religious sect. You are free here. This means you are not bound to adopt a way of life imposed on you by some other. So you are well conscious about religion, but you never mind other things except that I have to be free from all the religious dogmas. I have to act for the welfare of the country, welfare of the globe, and welfare of the nation. Now you see about the book. The book, Alexander is a very distinguished scholar, and his work on social scientific, religious studies is his real contribution from the uh, current of religious thinking from Gothenburg. So he represents that current of thinking on religion. And you know, most of time, he always bases his ideas on observation of empirical observation of the fact, what is going there on, what is going there on. But some of the authors I found there, they have based on the observation, but some of the facts they have put in that is based on their own construction, their own acceptance of hearsay, not only observation. So they have accepted also. Now you see, the book is published from Routledge. And you Routledge, you know, very a foreign publisher. It's a very popular and a standard publisher also in India. So the book is published by a very good publisher and written by 3 scholars who are well known in their field of the religious study, especially the social scientific. This means empirical approach to religious studies. But what, when this is business, getting a book, the publisher do business through the authors. So the topic is, the future of religious studies in India. So if we want to seek the future of religious studies in India, how can you approach? Professor Sender has already told us about how can it be approached, that the Western things should be adopted here also. First thing. That second, textual study by the West and other means also. So textual, experiential, and from the practices from East and West, so that a global perspective is made about the religious practices. But I think that the book will definitely be welcomed by the readers. But the possibilities about the future of religious studies in India, that also serves a purpose, but that will not be, because Indian mind is well known that we have not to be involved in any religious conflict. We are secular, and we will remain secular by mind, not only by constitution. So we do not accept the religious differences only, but we celebrate, in France. Muslims, they were invited by France 200 years back, but they are not accepted as one number civilians of France as 8. Okay, but here in India, we welcome Christians. We welcomed more than 1,000 years back. We welcomed all the invaders also. Not only that, we accepted their practices also, but not as they wanted to accept without conversion. We accepted what is useful in the Indian continent. Only that much practices we accepted. Otherwise, we did not accept it, because India thinks about global welfare as the objective of their duties, and the religion also. We worship sun, and we worship fire, we worship trees and all that. So our concern with religion is global, more than universal. So the book is very good, and I think that these things might have been emphasized there in that book. And I'm thankful to Professor Oxender that he has introduced that book here in person. So he's a great man, a great scholar, and have given us to share his views on religious studies also. But the thing is that we Indians, we do not accept anything without questioning. So, so with these remarks, I will thank you all.
On behalf of the department, I would like to thank the speaker of the day, who has presented his paper or who has opened his book, new published book in front of us, which has highlighted certain issues like, as you know that we the human being, the seeker of knowledge, and I found, through my observation, the speaker claims that knowledge is also an education, religion is the part of knowledge, and it is an essential knowledge. We have to seek about that. And he has also claimed that it is a knowledge which consists a bundle of thought, and it is spread in every disciplines. As we know, we are studying sociology, ethics, mathematics, physics, chemistry. Wherever you will go, you must found some sort of curiosities there, or essence of that disciplines or education is that there. That is something what I understood from speaker's point of view. That is something called religion. And thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your thought-provoking as well as so informative talk. And in addition, I would like to thank the chairman of the seminar today. He has also put some scholarly views or ideas which are so much useful and interconnected with the speaker's point, and some others also, some additional points which are also we found here. And he has also synthesized the wholesome views from the participants as well as speakers. So thank you so much, sir. Now the time to give formally vote of thanks. So I would like to invite Dr. Rahul Kumar Maurya, Assistant Professor, Philosophy Department and Religion, BHU. Sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rajiv, for giving me this opportunity to propose vote of thanks. So now I would like to first thank our speaker of the day, Professor Oxender, for his brilliant presentation on religious studies. And it has also provoked a lot of questions which has been engaging for the speaker. And I think the session has been really a great success. So thank you so much for sparing time and enlightening us. So thank you once again. I would like to thank our chair of the day, chair for the seminar, Professor D. Tiwari sir,
who has been always ready for any academic activities that the department undertakes. And he has been always extending and showering his knowledge upon us. So thank you so much, sir, for sparing your valuable time and enlightening us. I would also like to extend our heartfulness to the head of the department, Professor Anand Kumar Mishra, sir, who has been always encouraging and motivating us for carrying forward the academic activities. And that's why we all have experienced and witnessed these Saturday seminar activities on every Saturday. So I would also thank Professor Anand Mishra. Now, I would also like to thank our senior colleagues and young colleagues, Professor M.R. Mehta sir, Professor S.P. Pandey sir, Professor Durgesh Chaudhary sir, Professor Srivastav ma'am, and Dr. Baleshwar Yadav sir, Dr. Pramod Kumar Bagre sir, and Dr. Grace Darling ma'am, Dr. Suti Mishra ma'am, Dr. Neeti Singh, Dr. Kalpana Yadav ma'am, Dr. Priyanka Yadav, and Dr. Priyanka Mishra and Dr. Rajiv Lochan Behra. So I would like to extend my heartfulness to all these senior colleagues and young colleagues who have been actively participating and making this event successful. I would also like to extend my thankfulness to many of the professors who are connected to this seminar through online platform. Professor Krishnaya sir and Professor D.P. Singh sir, P.B. Singh sir, and Professor D.A. Gangadhar sir. And some of the professors who have been always participating in each and every academic activities that this department undertakes. So once again, my thankfulness to all these professors and young scholars and students of the department, as well as the students from other universities who have been participating and making this seminar a great success. At the last, I would also like to extend the thankfulness to the office persons, Sanjay ji and Mohan ji, without whom we could not organize any such great activities. So thank you to our office persons and everyone, even to anyone whom I have forgotten to mention. So once again, thanks to each and everyone for making your active participation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul sir. Now, I can say it's my heartfelt thanks to ma'am from Sweden, who is the wife of our speaker, Anke Sandar. So really, ma'am, I believe that you are the strength of Sir Professor Sandar, as well as today you make this, also you make us so stronger. So thank you. So with the permission of our HOD, now we are going to close the seminar. Thank you all. Thank you, one and all.